All right, so we're here today for our first CI working group meeting of 2021. And today, Keith and I will be talking to you about CI for faculty. And so just a little bit of preface for this presentation. This is a presentation we actually give our faculty every year. And so it'll be a little bit meta because we're gonna show you the presentation we give them as kind of a way to show how you could potentially show your faculty how they can do CI on their own. And so we'll walk through kind of how we show them what CI is, and then ultimately how we train them to do it themselves. And so next slide, please. So again, Keith will walk through a CI overview, and then I'll walk through the exact way we teach our faculty to analyze a sponsor and a program. And then we'll have discussion and questions. We'd love for this to be a great conversation. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer. As I said, we've done this every year for about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. And so we've had a lot of different experiences with it. So we're happy to answer any questions that you all have. And with that, I will turn it over to Keith.
Right. Good morning or happy lunchtime, whatever time zone you're in. I'll be going over the CI overview. And as Jamie said, this is kind of meta. So I'll be talking, some of the slides I may just kind of let you look at, but I'll talk about why they're included and what the approach is. So some of it is, just presenting. In different trainings you may have been in, sometimes you may get too deep into the topic without like the proper background. So this first part of the presentation is really about providing the researcher with some background on what we do, what our office provides, the mindset that we take to projects, and how they can implement it in the work that they do. So where we start is defining what CI is. Our initial slide is what is competitive intelligence, and that's where we come to. We've not actually included the Slido poll in our presentation before. We may start doing that. But if you have thoughts on what coworkers, researchers, whoever, friends think of what CI is, go ahead and provide some responses, and then I'll give everybody a minute to think up of something, and then I will go to the next slide where we provide our answer.
So I see people, I see answers in there, but I'm not seeing it on the screen.
Yeah, Keith, have you switched to the online, the version there?
Apparently not. We're giving it away, sorry. Oh, okay, that's why. It's because I'm on the slide, not on the site. Sorry, this is the, there we go. Sorry, it is because it was the same screen that's in the PowerPoint. Like, okay, great. All right, so this is Inside Baseball, finding information to help win, no clue. We get that one a lot. Competitive edge, hacking, data, CIA. Yeah, that's kind of what we get to. I'm gonna switch back to the presentation. So what we present with faculty is, yeah, people think maybe we're hackers or we're spies. We do awesome graphic visualizations, but really we sit in front of a computer. If I wear contacts, not glasses, so otherwise that could definitely be me. That's what we do. So then we define what it actually is. And the tagline that we use internally is that we are providing actionable intelligence. We're not trying to just provide data. We're trying to provide information that either in the reports that we generate or in what we're training them to do, that they can do, implement it into the work that they're doing. It's not just data that's nice to know. It is strategic. In the projects that we do not go in with an answer. We may advocate for an answer, but we only do that after we've done the analysis. We don't try and back up a response that's desired. We like quantitative data. As I said, we want actionable and we want repeatable. We're trying to develop systems where when we are looking at programs or sponsors or whatnot, we have a process to make that streamlined in the future so that we're not reinventing the wheel each time. So after we've defined CI, we want to provide context. It's a new concept, perhaps for the researcher. They may not feel like they're on top of it. So we're trying to provide more confidence that this is something that they can easily implement and do. So I start off with what happens trying to make competitive intelligence more accessible. And I start with this because it's an industrial activity. It's what corporate America does, and kind of lay out that whatever industry it is, whether it's apparel, telecommunications, defense, there's 6 core areas of CI in the industrial space. And whether it's looking at competitors, markets, products, industries, vendors, customers, all that stuff should resonate. Those concepts make sense. Yeah, having more information about that is good. But how do we apply this in an academic setting? And that's the tricky part. But really, they map pretty well. So competitors are competitors, but our markets are our funding opportunities. Our products are the expertise of the faculty, of the researcher. The industry is their research field. Vendors are the other assets that they can take advantage of to help them with their proposals. And then last, their customers are their sponsors. So all of this maps pretty well, and they operate differently than they would in industrial space, but providing this context makes it seem accessible. And then I give them a boost of confidence. They're already doing competitive intelligence. They're already doing it, because when you look at what their expertise and their research field, they're staying on top of those things. And they're essentially doing CI to be competitive in their research base. So we're providing context and tools and a mindset on how to address those other 4 areas to make them more competitive for research proposals. So next, we describe what we do. And this is just kind of a plug of what our office provides. This may be different in your situation. So we have a series of regular products that we provide, looking at 3 primary units of analysis, either internally here at ASU, what's happening in the competitive landscape, but what other universities are doing, and what sponsors want, and what programs they offer. So those are the 3 units that we look at in the products that we provide, and we let them know what we offer if they want to take advantage of our off-the-shelf stuff. But really, the importance of why they're in the seminar is so that they can take some of these principles on their own and apply it to finding the research opportunities and the sponsors that are most appropriate for them, and position themselves well for that. So we just talk about the process. Again, laid out like this, it's not rocket science. This isn't like drastically new concepts, but it's a way to think about it, rather than I think that kind of the typical view of faculty is that, it's like, oh, there's a funding opportunity, let's go after it. And we're trying to put in place a process for them to think through on what's a good use of their time. So first, they need to plan. And again, and then I'm upfront that some of these may not apply to what they need to do, because we have this process because we're providing a product to somebody else. If somebody is doing CI for themselves to make them more prepared, some of these steps may not be necessary, because they don't need a final product for somebody else. They just need the data and transform it on their own. So we have the ideas for planning, what they need to do, the collection, and the 2 key elements here that we emphasize is human intelligence, although it's kind of there at the bottom. Jamie will talk about this more in terms of developing a relationship with the program manager, and we hammer on that one all the time. And then, of course, with any research, it's knowing when to stop. So providing this kind of background on what they're doing. And again, these are just the broad principles of what we do, and getting them to think about. We have different questions that they may want to analyze. And again, as this becomes a repeatable process, those questions that they want to answer will become apparent, so that they can move through this process more efficiently. And then it's transformation. This is another big area where they can kind of cut this short, because we have to write reports. They don't. They just need to know how to, again, the intelligence that they need to make themselves more competitive. But it's getting into that mindset of storytelling. What happens? What are those elements that come out in the history of the sponsor in the program that can move them forward? What makes sense? What so they're not going in blind while writing a proposal. And then last, value add. While I was setting up this presentation in that kind of meta approach, I'm thinking, this section should probably be closer to the front. But the value that CI provides really is what we see in the background there is time. What we're trying to do is an upfront time investment to allow them to know what proposals or what opportunities are good to go after. That goes into decision making, identifying where they're ready to be competitive and where maybe they need more time. They're not experienced enough, or they don't have enough of a background, or the sponsor requires, they don't fulfill all the sponsor requirements. So then that also feeds into their planning, developing a timeline for when opportunities are appropriate and what they needed to do, prepare for those opportunities, and what the timeline for those opportunities if they're reoccurring. And again, this all helps avoid surprises and reduce risk. So we're going through all this process on why they want to do this, so they're not scattershot and kind of chasing everything, but having more of a focus on what they're looking for. And so that's the value that we provide. And then that's kind of my intro spiel before I turn it over to Jamie for the actual training example and getting into a program analysis. So I'll actually stop there for any questions now, and we'll have some questions after Jamie presents and open that up for discussion. But if anybody has any questions now, I can answer that.
Keith, hi, this is Alba.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I have a question. How many of these have you guys presented, or and what is the normal attendance and acceptance of this type of presentation by the faculty?
So we do this annually as part of our proposal development workshop series that we offer to faculty and grad students and other people that are interested. Attendance figures, they're recorded, so not everybody watches it live. The attendance live is generally like in the 30s, I think. Some, and it kind of varies over the course of the workshop series. And so we present this annually. We've done an occasional specialized group on it. Those are rather ad hoc, and I don't really have a good number. We probably present it maybe 1 or 2 other times per year outside of the workshop series.
I also just want to add that for the recordings, we can see how many people watch it later. And we looked a few days ago, and our last presentation on this had about 70 views. So kind of all in all, if you add live and recorded, we're seeing about 100 people watching this.
Thanks. Thanks. That's very good. So
I'm just going to stop sharing because Jamie is going to share her screen so she can close her deck. And if anybody has any other questions, we can also save your questions until the end after Jamie's presentation.
Okay, I just want to make sure you guys can now see my screen. Okay, great. Well, if there's no other questions, then we'll get started on the next part of our process. So then I jump in and I come in with this, the real training part of this process. And so we call this analyzing the sponsor and the program. And we have 3 key takeaways for our faculty. Through this training, we will show them how to give their proposal a competitive edge, how to learn about their competition, how to align their proposal to fit sponsor and program goals. And really, we tell the faculty that if there's one thing they walk away with from our presentation, it's that understanding what the sponsor has awarded in the past or wants to fund in the future can give their proposal a competitive edge. And then through the training that we're about to jump into, we show them, how do you know what a sponsor wants? How do you know what's been funded in the past? And how can you use that information to give yourself a competitive edge? And so we have a 5-step method for growing competitiveness. And this is what we tell our faculty. If they go through these 5 steps, they will be more competitive. And so the first is understanding the sponsor and the program. The second is reading the solicitation. The third is watching program webinars. And then the fourth we have highlighted on the screen because this is really where CI kind of really gets going, and that is analyzing previous awardees. And then for step 5, we have human intelligence, as Keith mentioned before, that's talking to faculty who have submitted before. Oops. Okay, and so we'll jump in with step 1. So we tell our faculty, if you're wondering, how can I know what a sponsor wants? This part is for you. And so we tell them to understand the sponsor, you really, you have to know that the sponsor has specific aims and specific objectives. And the most competitive proposals will highlight how your research as a faculty member will actually help the sponsor achieve their own aims. And so we give them 3 different ways they can go about figuring out what a sponsor is all about, what they want to fund. And so first we highlight strategic plans. And I have the strategic plans, we put the cover pages for a number of different sponsors on the screen, really to drive home the fact that sponsors have these, they're available, they're easy to find, they're frequently updated. And this is definitely something our faculty should be looking at for any sponsor. And here, when we talk about this portion of the presentation, we really try to drive home that the techniques we're talking to them about are sponsor agnostic. And this really kind of helps show that any sponsor they're looking at, any size program they're looking at, these techniques can work. And so we then jump into, kind of showing them exactly how to go through a strategic plan with the CI mindset. And so we highlight things like the mission and the vision and let them know, like, this is the sponsor telling you what they want to do. They also have their strategic goals and objectives. They have their long-term performance goals. And so those are things that if our faculty understand, they can have a better view of how their research fits in with the overall sponsor's mission, visions, and goals. We also talk to our faculty about budgets. And here, what we're really trying to show them is that you can read a budget a lot of different ways, but to read it as a CI professional, you're really focusing on the research ideas, the programs, the projects, and really like how is their funding changing over time, or where are they putting a lot of their money? This is kind of where you're putting your money is normally something you value. And so we tell our faculty, go in, look at the budget, see what research areas and ideas are growing, which ones are shrinking, which ones make up the most percent-wise or dollar-wise, just to get an idea of what the sponsor is really interested in. And then lastly, we encourage our faculty when understanding a sponsor to follow press and media. Sponsors, staying up to date with a new program they might announce in the news, any big change at the sponsor that's announced in the news, if you're following a sponsor and you see they've just awarded a ton of money to a university, like those are things you want to pay attention to, just so that you have this really good understanding of everything that's happening at a sponsor. Okay, and so once we've showed them how to understand a sponsor, then we get into this next part where they might be wondering, where can I get information about a program? And so with that, before we jump into how we teach our faculty to, understand a program, I want to pause. And if you go back to Slido, I will activate this poll. And so I just am wondering, how do you get your faculty to understand a program? Yeah, I'm seeing great answers. We've got read. We definitely emphasize that, read about the program. One-on-one meetings, networking, sharing program announcements with them, discussing what's been funded in the past, perfect. Sharing previous awards with them, great. Of course, speaking to program managers, yeah. I ask them direct questions about it to confirm they have done their research. Ooh, I like that. Review past awards, present it to them in bite-sized chunks through our opportunity kickoffs. Fabulous. Tie guidelines to sponsor goals. Perfect. Yeah, these are all great answers. Great answers. Yeah, so I'm going to hop back into our actual presentation here. These are pretty much all of the same things we do. So that's great. We're all using the same best practices. For this presentation, we try to just show them the program page. And we have 2 big things for if you want to understand a program, we tell them, go to the program page and talk to the program manager. And we show them the program page from a CI mindset. Again, and I'll keep saying that because a lot of these things, you know, either us as staff are already doing or faculty are already doing, but maybe they're not thinking about it from the CI perspective. And so we highlight some of the things that, as Keith said, keep calm, you're already doing it. We try to show them that they are doing this. It's just thinking about it a little differently. And so we highlight the news section and we really drive home the fact of you've got to follow the sponsor news, but you also need to follow your program news. And then we do highlight the program managers. And that is really where we kind of drive home this message that talking to a program manager is invaluable. And we encourage our faculty to do it because it really makes a difference. And so we talk to them about how they can go about doing that and kind of the best practices around engaging with program managers. We then highlight the synopsis. Again, one of the comments was read, and we tell them, read the synopsis. That's where you can understand you know, what a program is all about. And then we highlight webinars and awards, and we highlight that those are on the program page. And then later in our steps, as you know, step 3 and 4, I'll get into exactly how you use those webinars and awards for CI. So that's how we get our faculty to understand a program. And then step 2 is read the solicitation, read the full solicitation. That will help you.
Amy, hi.
Yeah.
Carolyn. I was actually wondering, and I don't know if we have time for this, if people might, if we can share a little bit of experience with talking with program managers, because I've had the following types of experiences. Some, again, some program managers are great. Some just tell you submit. Yes, yes, we love that, submit, because they're trying to get their own numbers up and their program will look more competitive. If there's more proposals, even though they're going to fund, you know, however many they fund. The other thing is we've had experiences where you like at any age, for example, you can actually submit a draft into the program manager. The program manager loved it, gave us great feedback, like loved our evaluation section, everything. The review committee, I mean, the reviews were bad. Like the people that they actually selected for the outside reviewers didn't like our evaluation plan, like had all these criticisms of our project. And it was like, wow, what a disconnect between what the program manager said and what happened in the review phase. And in fact, the improvements we made were to the proposal between the draft and the submission were based on the feedback from the program managers. I don't know if other people have had those kinds of experiences, and I'd love to hear, you know, so I didn't know if anyone else, if you could share why you think it's always it's a great thing to do.
Yeah, stop sharing the presentation because this is, I think, great discussion point. So if anyone wants to unmute and talk to Carolyn about your experience, I think that would be very helpful. Any takers? I see a note in the chat from Dr. Terry Reed. We do an annual panel of 4 to 5 program managers, current and former, to show this diversity.
Yeah, we have the exact same experience, and that's why we started doing this talking to your program officer so that people could understand that they've got to know more about their program officers to understand the reactions.
Yeah, I think IHR started doing that on the humanities side, also for the humanities broadly, which has been really helpful.
Great. Well, I hope that helps answer your question, Carolyn. I'm going to jump back into the slides, but if you want to have more discussion, we absolutely can towards the end of the presentation.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. All right, so then our third step, we encourage our faculty to watch program webinars. So at this point, if they've done their due diligence CI-wise and they've followed our step process, they have information about the sponsor, they have information about the program, and now we tell them, you know, how they, and they have information about the solicitation, of course, because they've just read it in step 2. And so now we tell them, how can I get, you know, how do you get information beyond the solicitation? And so we encourage them to watch program webinars. And you know, we highlight different sponsors here again from the message that this is very agnostic. Not all programs have webinars, but they do often have a webinar. And when they're available, our faculty, we just encourage them to go watch them. And for our special CI mindset portion, we encourage them to pay attention to the Q&A portion. That's exceptionally important because you can understand Maybe you can figure out who's asking questions and what their research is about. That might give you some insights into your competition. Or, you know, the program manager, they might say something in that Q&A portion that was not in the solicitation explicitly. They might provide some more detail. And so those are things that, you know, we encourage our faculty, like that's human intelligence, watching these webinars, paying attention to what people are saying. So that's kind of our third step here. And we really drive home that should be doing this. And then as a little bonus for our faculty at ASU, we actually have a program called our TRIPS program, where College Enterprise Office will actually pay for faculty to travel to their sponsor and meet with their program officer or multiple program officers, meet with the sponsor and just kind of, you know, do human intelligence. And so I just kind of wondered, you know, we have our TRIPS program that we advertise, but I'm sure a lot of institutions have similar programs. And so if you head back over to Slido, I will share this next poll just to see, like, what programs do you have at your institution? Yeah, so I'm seeing lots of great answers. We do this at the university and college levels, travel grants for early career faculty. We wrap the trips around some workshops and peer review of one-pagers. That sounds fantastic. Great, so yeah, there's a lot of different ways to kind of go about doing some of this stuff. Oh, I see one more. We also have a travel program. Wonder whether anyone has a mechanism to bring that intelligence back to the home institution rather than having it stay with the PI alone. You know, that's a fantastic question. Definitely a great tip there. That would be, yeah, maybe that's something like a workshop with people who've utilized the programs. That's a great question. We wrap the trips when we will be in DC to provide in-town support. We offer seed grants for faculty planning, multi-million-dollar proposals, and often tell them to travel to meet their program officer, even if that wasn't in their original budget. Fantastic, fantastic. All right, so I'll head back into our slideshow here and show you kind of our next step. I think those are great programs, kind of similar to what we have going on at ASU. So our fourth step is really where we get into like the real heart of CI, and this is analyzing previous awardees. And so we tell our faculty, you've read about the sponsor, you've read about the program, you've got the solicitation, you've met with people, you're talking to people, you've done all of this research, but you still have questions. And this is where we tell them analyzing previous awardees can really help. And so our first step is to show them where to go to find the data. And so we've linked, and we always link for our faculty, the sponsor databases, and the links we provide are 2 directions on how to use the sponsor database. And then for some of the sponsors that are a little bit, you know, more difficult to track, we walk them through our best practices for like DOD and NASA and that sort of thing. And so we tell them, like, here's how we go about gathering the data for these a little bit more challenging sponsors. And then, you know, they might be wondering, well, once I'm in a database, like, what information do I pull from it? And so, you know, we just provide them. This is not fully exhaustive. They might have different questions, or they might not need all of this. So it's really kind of about the questions they want to answer as a PI. Oops, sorry. And so again, not fully exhaustive, but gives you an idea of some of the information you can pull from an awards database. All right, and so before we hop into the questions we typically get asked from our faculty about a program that we teach them to answer, I wondered if you guys could share some of the questions your faculty ask you about programs. And so I will go in and activate this next poll. And you should be seeing that on your end now. All right, so I'm seeing lots of great questions. They're typically asking typical award size, how many students in the education component, applicability, of course, what is the funding threshold, cost share, Who won last year? Are we competitive? Typical dollar amount. Can I get a copy of a successful proposal? Yes, we hear that a lot as well. Do I have to follow the solicitation? Oh, yeah. What should they prioritize? Proposal success rate, does my science fit? They tend to ask for more standard info like management plan templates, etc. Great. So yeah, these are a lot of the same questions that we get at ASU. And so I'll hop back into our slides and show you, how we teach our faculty. If these are the questions you have, here are some ways to answer them. And so similar to you guys, we do get a lot of how many awards does this program fund? And so for this, we call this an award count analysis. And so we'll of course look at the solicitation to see how many they're projecting to fund, but we do also look at the awards data and look at how many they funded in the past and kind of get some trends there among, around this program typically funds X number of awards a year. How much funding might I receive? What is a realistic budget? Of course, you can go into the solicitation and they will tell you what they're intending to fund. But you can also look at the award sides of past awardees to figure out, what's the real funding amount? What is a realistic budget based on what the sponsor is actually funding? And then we do get a lot of the questions around, who's won this in the past, which institutions have won awards in the past. And so with that, we do this kind of exemplar institution analysis where we show, okay, these institutions are winning a lot or they've won consistently. What are they doing? What is their makeup? How are they doing this? And so we kind of try to do some digging to figure out, and we encourage our faculty to do some digging to figure out, like, why does this institution keep winning? Is there something about this institution, something about facilities, things like that? So there's a lot of different ways you can go about once you know who's winning a lot, kind of figuring out, okay, sure, they're winning a lot. That's great. But then how are they doing it? And how can you do something similar? Other questions. Oh, I forgot I animated these. Well, there you go. Other questions we get, and now I'll do the animation. Geography. So we do preface that geography is not always relevant. Where are awardees located? But for some kinds of research, it could be relevant. So if your research is kind of environmentally driven, and you're, at least at Arizona State University, we're in a desert environment. And so, if you're looking at a program and or really, even if it's not environmentally driven research, but you're looking at a large program that's never funded anything in your region, maybe that's something interesting to know. Maybe if your research is environmentally driven, highlighting that, they've never funded a desert environment, maybe there's something interesting about the science being done in a desert environment that, they can't get from a coastal environment or things of that nature. So again, geography is not always relevant, but when it is relevant, it's worth looking into. We also get questioned of who has won in the past. And with this, we try to encourage our faculty to go and look at PI profiles of the PIs that have won in the past and look at things like their bio, their publications, their awards, and really figure out, like, what's the trend? Is this full professors? Is it assistant professors? And kind of what's the expectation of who they might fund based on who they funded in the past? We always tell our faculty we don't want to discourage them from applying if their profile looks different. Of course, we always see outliers, and that's standard. But we do want them to kind of have an idea of who's getting this kind of funding. Maybe there's something they need to do to kind of preface this award. If they're going after a large center, do they have kind of these awards that come prior to that kind of building to a large center grant? So that's how we help our faculty just kind of analyze who's won in the past and what it means for them. And then we have, does the program favor certain topics? And so with the topic preference, what we're really doing is encouraging the faculty to go in and look at the past awards and see. Of course, the program page will have its synopsis. The solicitation will list topics they're interested in. They can gather that information that way. But they can also go in and look at the past awards. And we use kind of a fun, silly example with our faculty that I'll use here. And we say, if a program is funding research in fruit, then that's great. You have to ask yourself, when you look at the solicitation, you look at the program page, yes, my research is also in fruit. And then you might get into the actual awards, and you'll see they've almost always funded research on oranges. And maybe your research is on oranges. That's fantastic. That's great. Make sure, you show how your research is unique and that sort of thing. Maybe you're researching apples. And if you're researching apples, that's still fine. It's still a fruit, but you need to know that, like, that's not the favored topic. And so you really have to kind of think through that and, some of the challenges and opportunities that come along with that. And so that's kind of how we tell our faculty, if they're favoring certain topics, that doesn't negate your application if it's not in that topic, but it's definitely something to think about. And then lastly, we get these questions around teaming a lot. Who should I team with? How many team members should I have? What's the average team size? That sort of thing. And so for this, it's really, you know, going out to those previous awards and figuring out what do the teams look like. Again, not a hard and fast rule. These are all trends, but they can give our faculty an idea of what typically has worked in the past. And that kind of gets back to our main takeaway. If you understand what they've done in the past, it can help you be competitive today. And so with that, I want to turn it back over to you guys to see, those are the program features that we analyze, things like, you know, award count, award size, teaming. What are the program features that you look at to help answer questions that your faculty have? And I will go into Slido again and activate this next poll. PI rank, yep. Notations, absolutely. Units of analysis that fit into SWOT, that's fantastic. What institutions have won? Topic, especially, yes, especially with the NSF Big Ideas, we do that a lot as well. Award size, topic preference, institutional preference, absolutely. We look at past companies in the program. Interesting. R1 versus R2 competitiveness. That's very interesting. Okay. All right, so it looks like we've got some great answers. So I'm gonna hop back into the slides and keep moving. Again, it looks like we're analyzing a lot of the same features. We're all using the same best practices, which is ideal. That's what we want to be doing. All right, so our final step is talking to faculty who've submitted before, and this is really all about human intelligence. And so we give our faculty kind of a couple of questions, 3 or 4, I think, that are really good elicitation questions. And I'm not going to share those with you, but I will say we had a great CI working group webinar on elicitation. And so if you're trying to put together questions for your faculty that they can use to go talk to other faculty, previous awardees, and ask the right kinds of questions to get really solid answers, I'd suggest going back and watching Ellen Naylor's presentation for the CI working group. But really, from talking to faculty who've submitted before, you know, we let them know that faculty, whether they have won or not, can share really good advice. They can share reviewer comments. They can share contacts and best practices. At ASU, our faculty are really open to sharing, and that's a really great culture. And so we, you know, encourage faculty to utilize that, to go talk to other faculty and get an idea of what's worked for them specifically in the past. And then with that, we just kind of review the 5 steps. So we have step 1, understanding the sponsor and the program. Step 2, reading the solicitation. Step 3, watching those program webinars, paying special attention to the Q&A section. And then step 4, analyzing previous awardees for things like award count, award size, exemplar institutions, geography, when relevant, PI profiles, topic preference, and teaming. And then lastly, talking to faculty who have submitted before. And with that, we open it up to our faculty with questions. And then we actually normally walk through some practice with them. So we go in and we actually do this with them for a couple different sponsors so they get an idea of like, this is how we do it. So I think Keith normally runs NSF, and then I'll come in with DOD, and then he normally does NEH. And so we just really walk through like, here's how you really go out and do this, and kind of show them how to do that. And we open it up for questions, and we close out with our key takeaway message that understanding what a sponsor has awarded in the past or wants to fund in the future can give your proposal a competitive edge. And so with that, that's actually the end of Keith and I's presentation, but we'd love to open it up to discussion. Thank you, LJ. I see in the chat you've shared Ellen Naylor's webinar. I would recommend that. It's a great webinar from our CI working group. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask?
Or comments about your experiences in connecting with faculty and messages that resonate with them at your university.
I'm curious, as someone working at ASU, how do you measure the success of doing a presentation like this? For example, is there a way for us to identify which faculty are using your 5-step plan, and if that's increasing their submissions and success rate?
So we don't have exact data on that, because particularly with the view recordings, we can see how often it's being viewed, but we're not tracking which faculty. We are, I think, doing some planning on doing better outreach to faculty so that more participate. And in doing that outreach, I think, I think we've developed the content well, and when we've been in smaller groups, in person with faculty, we see how well it resonates. But with, I think our goal for this year is really to push it more with faculty, get them more engaged, so that those messages and what we're teaching takes hold more, but also that gives us a better connection to who's actually using it and how to track that. So
Yeah.
I think that the tracking is still maybe lagging a little bit, just because it's kind of an open resource.
Right.
But so I would say what we've done is advance the content to the point now where tracking going forward and seeing how faculty make use of it is something that now we can focus more on.
Right. Yeah. It's just such a world of unknown when going out into the world of faculty versus staff, and thinking about, do we need to actually train some staff within the units that we're working directly with faculty as well, so that they're up on these new, well, they're not new methods, but so that they're up on the methods that the faculty are starting to use from, the university-wide resources. That's always like something at a unit level that I'm always thinking about, is how do I ensure I understand what faculty are learning as well?
Absolutely. So the entire proposal development workshop series is posted on our internal research, and it is open to staff. And a lot of times we do have staff attending these. And so we are hopeful that staff attend and kind of get this same knowledge and can also institute these same best practices. I think the more people that are doing CI, in my opinion, the better. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I learned it, was from attending your workshop. So I think it's super important to do both faculty and staff. Thank you.
Absolutely.
This is great.
I mean, so it is kind of a long-term process in terms of developing culture, because really it is a culture shift. And so it's establishing those relationships with the academic units so that they can shepherd in more faculty in the program, so that these messages that that faculty may overlook, or if they're kind of like on their own, may not think of. And as I said, I think we've developed the content where we really like what our presentation is, and now that becomes easier to sell and get engagement with the faculty. And what else can we do to increase that engagement, so that, again, it's that value proposition of that time investment, the time investment up front, to find those better opportunities, to find where they should focus their efforts, rather than kind of, oh, there's an FOA, I will apply for it. And that's kind of the mindset. The long-term, big picture goal is to break that mindset of CFOA, I must respond,
Yeah.
instead of like, what are the FOAs that are most appropriate for me that I can plan for?
Yeah, it's
and
definitely the culture of return on investment, for sure.
So that's the goal, and that at times feels pie in the sky, but that's the vision that kind of drives our work and what we do with this presentation and our outreach, particularly to early career faculty. But these also could work with mid-career so that they can focus their efforts better on winnable programs.
Hi, Jimmy and Keith and everyone. Jimmy and Keith, that was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. There are several of us on the Zoom from UC San Diego, and I think we're all inspired to try something along the lines of what you've done on our campus. It occurs to me, and I'm sure it's occurred to folks on the Zoom, that the whole competitive intelligence process is really not so much different than what our faculty are used to doing in terms of their own research. Like they would never embark on a research project without doing, the literature review and the deep dive into what others have done and what approaches have worked and what have not worked, then looking at the negative results as well. And if they did that, their work would almost certainly not be successful, or not as successful as if they did that. And so I think the point that was made early in the presentation about, you're probably already doing it, or this is more familiar than you think it might be. Just because you didn't call it competitive intelligence doesn't mean you haven't already been doing it all along. I think that really can be a key point to help make it approachable and attractive to those we're trying to engage. So anyway, thank you so much. This is really fabulous.
Yeah, and that's part of the evolution of our presentation. So like that example from industrial, from the corporate side, was added in within the past year, and it's really, again, how to make the topic approachable and give them confidence that this isn't, like you said, a foreign concept. I mean, as I said during my part in the kickoff, it can be frustrating to get blasted from the fire hose like right away with information. We want to provide some context so that they feel confident that this is something that they can incorporate into their process.
One of the other messages we really have for our faculty is that, once you understand a sponsor and you understand a program, even if you don't win the first time, you still have that knowledge. And so it's that, once you've done this, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, unless you're completely changing your sponsor and your program. But it's really like that upfront time investment really does pay off dividends down the line.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also, the points that were made about then once that information is in hand, how can we as RD folks maximize that information so it's not just living with one individual or one team, but it becomes part of our sort of asset collection that we can then share. One thing that I think maybe, and I may have missed it, that wasn't specifically pinged on here as part of the competitive intelligence, and again, part of a long range strategy in the vein of communication with program officers would be, service as a reviewer on panels and study sections. And, folks that some of us on the call I know have been reviewers, but then also listening to those who have done that and come back, and they say that was extraordinarily valuable. The insights that they derived from that effort, and it is an intensive, very intensive effort, so it's not something everybody can do, are just extraordinarily valuable. So maybe that's another piece that could be added into the recommendations for faculty.
Yeah, and Sharon, your comments made me think of two different things. So one is a kudos to LJ, who's on the back end managing all of this for us, which is fantastic. But she also runs what we call opportunity kickoffs. And that is where we do kind of these kickoffs for large opportunities, where we bring in faculty who have proposed, who have won, to really share their knowledge. And we share our CI, of course, but that lived knowledge is something really special. And so we do those very frequently in our office. And that's something that I think LJ has really done a great job of kind of making a thing at our institution. And then the other thing I want to note is around serving as a reviewer. So I'll give another kudos to a team member who's not on today, but she's fantastic, Haley Bohall, who manages our limited submissions. She really encourages our faculty to not only be reviewers for the sponsor, but to be reviewers for our internal limited submissions process. And that's something that can help them as well, just getting familiar with the process there too. So I think those are both good ideas. Any other questions or thoughts?
Hi, Jamie. It's Alba again. It's more a suggestion than anything else. And thank you so much for this presentation. This is great. On the topic of geography, I actually found that if the intent is to apply for large centers, actually the geography gives pretty good indication of the possibility of having that awarded. And this we came across here inside OSU. We were planning on a large center. And when we looked at what has been awarded before, it was all around our state. And the chances are that the federal government will not put one more center in Ohio, considering that Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia, they're all had centers in the same area. So the suggestion then was perhaps propose the center, but focusing on something complementary to the other centers, right? And one more suggestion was I'm not necessarily so focused on the federal side, but on the industry side. And it is interesting to see that NSF directors or program directors are always giving presentations to institutions that are not universities per se, like UIDP, that is the University Industry Demonstration Partnership. So they come and they talk about NSF and DOE, DOD. So that I think it's a very good source of information because it brings another set of questions and more towards the industry side. And if the proposal has an industry component, that perhaps would be a very good source of human intelligence because they talk more in that kind of environment. So that's just two suggestions. Look outside, look for human intelligence outside the program per se.
Yeah, Alba, I think that's a great comment. I know you come at this from a little bit different way than Keith and I do with your industry experience. So I think that's a really good thing to make note of, is that these same practices we're using have application. There might be different ways of going about it.
Correct. Yep. Thank you.
Any other final thoughts? Where I know we're getting closer to the end of the hour.
No, I think from my side, I would like to have the same here at OSU. And so I think you guys are doing a great job. And thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing.
Well, thank you. So before we head off, unless there's any other comments, I just want to share this PDF. I'm hoping it loads. Can you all see this on the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So these are our upcoming sessions. So again, we're here today for March, but we also have our April session where Rebecca Bryant will present on research information management systems. And then our final session of the year for May will be an open discussion. And so if you don't have these on your calendar already, we'll send out this flyer with the recording of this presentation. You can add them and feel free to reach out to Keith or I if you have any questions about the content today. And we hope to see you back again in April.